The Tempestus Aquilons deploy exclusively by aerial grav drop. Their recruits often display self-sufficiency, improvisation, intuitive tactical understanding, and above all, a higher instance of violent tendencies, making them ideal do-or-die soldiers for the dangerous and fast-paced engagements of the 41st millennium. Hello there. In this video we're going to show you how to paint Tempestus Aquilons in 4 awesome alternative schemes that you can find in the Hivestorm dossier. The paints we'll be using are on the screen now. We've gone for nice simple schemes that look great without having to use multiple paints. We also have a list of the additional equipment we've used, but you can use whatever brushes you feel most comfortable with. If you're new to painting or want to brush up on your skills, you can check out the Citadel Color Painting Essentials playlist to learn all about our paints and techniques. As you can see, we've undercoated our Tempestus Aquilons with a few different sprays depending on what schemes we're going for. We've used Chaos Black, Wraithbone, Grey Seer and Mechanicus Standard Grey. Let's get painting. Right, so the first thing that we need to do is cover all of the undersuit with Grey Seer from the pot. The reason for this is that the spray has a slightly different finish than the Grey Seer from the pot, so if we make a mistake, this will help us when tidying up. Don't worry about being super neat here, just make sure your paint is thinned with water so you don't clog up any details on this stage. Okay, the next thing we need to do is pick out all of the carapace armor with Corax White. Try to avoid getting Corax White over any of the undersuited areas. If you do, you'll need to tidy back up with Grey Seer. We now need to add some shading, and for this we'll be using Soulblight Grey and applying it all over both the grey undersuit and white carapace armor. As always, with a shade paint, watch out for any pooling, and if you do notice any, dry off your brush and soak it up with the dry bristles. Once the shade is dry, you can apply another layer straight into the recesses if you'd like to as well. Next up, we're going to add some highlights. We're going to start with the undersuit first, and we'll be using Grey Seer to re-layer over the raised folds. Try to keep the highlight just to the raised areas. If you make a mistake, tidy back up with Soulblight Grey. With the undersuit done, we're now going to focus on the carapace armor, and we're going to highlight this with White Scar, going around all of the edges of the carapace, picking it out with the side of our brush for a smooth and consistent edge highlight finish. Alright, we're now going to pick out all of the carapace trim with Iron Warriors. Try to be as neat as you can here with these details. Taking a bit longer to make sure of a neat finish will more than likely save you time compared to rushing through these details and then having to tidy back up with the previous colors. Now that all of the trim has been picked out, we'll shade it with non-oil. Again, just taking our time and making sure that the shade is only going over the areas that we want it to. Okay, with the shade dry, we're now going to edge highlight the silver trim with Stormhost Silver. Stormhost Silver is a very thin layer paint already, so just add a tiny amount of water to your palette to make sure that the paint flows nice and smoothly off your brush. And there we go, our first scheme is complete. We've done the silver for the scheme, but won't do it for the others going forward. If you want to see how to do the silver for those ones, just refer back to this part of the video. Okay, we're moving on to our second alternative scheme, and this one has a yellow theme to it. We're going to use Xandri Dust to pick out all of the undersuit. Don't worry about being neat here, as you'll be painting over all of the other details later on. Just make sure that your paint is thin so it doesn't obscure any of those details. Once the undersuit is fully base coated, we'll then shade it with Seraphim Sepia. Watch out for any pooling and soak up the excess with dried bristles. When the shade is dry, you can do another straight into the recesses if you want to as well. Alright, we're now going to highlight the raised folds of the undersuit with Ushabti Bone. If you make a mistake here, just tidy back up with the previous colors. Once you're done with this highlight step, use Wraithbone from the pot to tidy up any overspill on the carapace armor, as we'll need this to be neat for the next stage. Right, we're now going to use Imperial Fist contrast paint straight from the pot and apply it over the carapace armor. Be as neat as you can here. A good tip is to do it slowly and one section of carapace armor at a time. This will give you enough time to tidy up any overspill with a clean brush. Because contrast is nice and thin, if you're quick enough, you can remove the paint before it starts to dry and therefore stain the area. However, if you can't do that, don't worry. Just tidy back up with the previous colors. Once your Imperial Fist contrast paint is completely dry, we'll then add some shade and depth to it. For this, we're using Cassandora Yellow shade paint and applying it straight into the recesses. Once you're done with that, do a 1-to-1 mix of Cassandora Yellow and Lahmian Medium and apply that over the lower sections of your carapace armor. This will add some great visual interest to your yellow. The combination of Imperial Fist and Cassandora Yellow is my favorite way to quickly paint yellow. Alright, with the shading stage done, we're now going to edge highlight the carapace armor with Dawn Yellow. Take your time with this step and try to keep the edge highlight as thin as you can. Dawn Yellow is very bright and a big jump up from Imperial Fist, so the smaller the highlight, the better it'll look. With that done, our second scheme is complete and looks awesome. I really love how vibrant the yellow is. Okay, our third alternative scheme is going to be a green base one, which also has a little bit of a camouflage pattern to it as well. However, the first thing that we need to do is to do the undersuit, and for this we'll be using Black Legion contrast paint straight from the pot. With that stage complete, we're now going to use Incubi Darkness to pick out all of the raised folds. If you make a mistake here, you can tidy back up with Black Legion. We've gone for Incubi Darkness here as a highlight for the black because it gives us a nice and very subtle finish. It's time to move on to the carapace armor, and we'll be using Auroch Flesh for this. Try to be as neat as you can around your undersuit details. You may need a couple of layers of Auroch Flesh as well, so wait for your first layer to dry completely before coming back to do another one. It's time for the fun bit. We're now going to do the camouflage pattern, and for this we'll be using Wah Flesh. We're looking to paint slightly wavy lines all over our carapace armor. I find that it is easy to map out the lines first before coming back to fill them in. Try to keep the width of these lines pretty small, as this will help to keep the camouflage in proportion with the carapace armor. Take your time when doing this step. If you make any mistakes, you can always tidy back up with Auroch Flesh. With the camo stripes done, we now need to shade the carapace, and for this we'll be using a Thonian camo shade and applying this straight into the recesses. As always, watch out for pooling, and if you notice any, soak it up with dry bristles. Now that the shade is dry, we need to highlight the carapace. We'll be using Krieg Khaki and highlighting over both the lighter and darker green. Just make your way around the carapace, picking out the edges. With that completed, our third scheme is finished. Painting camo lines is really fun. Just remember to try and keep the lines thin and in scale with the armor for the best possible effect. Alright, our last alternative scheme is going to be a red base one. The first thing that we need to do is paint the undersuit, and we'll be following the exact same recipe as we did for the previous one. So we'll be using Black Legion to pick out all of the undersuit. Just like the previous scheme, we'll now use Incubi Darkness to pick out the raised folds. If you make a mistake here, just tidy back up with Black Legion. With the undersuit done, we'll now pick out the carapace with Corn Red. Take your time and try to be as neat as you can near any previously painted details. We're now going to recess shade the red armor with non-oil. I'm using a small layer brush here for a little bit more control, but you can use whatever brush you feel most comfortable with. All that's left to do for the red carapace is edge highlight it with Evil Sunz Scarlet. I've gone with Evil Sunz Scarlet because it gives a really stark highlight that works nicely for our carapace armor. Okay, this scheme has a white spot color as well that we need to paint on the faceplate as well as the left knee. So we need to do those next. We'll be using Corax White as our base color for these areas. Remember to be careful around any previously painted details. Once that is done, we'll just shade the white with Soul Blight Grey. Finally, once the shade is dry, we need to edge highlight the white with White Scar. And there you go, 4 ways of doing alternative schemes for your Tempestus Aquilons. If you want to know how to paint the rest of your details, you can go check out Emma's guide on painting a Tempestus Aquilon to completion. These are just 4 of the alternative schemes that can be found in the Hivestorm dossier. Remember, you can paint yours however you like as well. We've had a lot of fun with this video, and we hope it's given you the inspiration to get your own Tempestus Aquilons painted and on the gaming board. For more painting videos, head over to our YouTube channel. If you need more help, you can always head to one of our Warhammer stores where our friendly staff will be more than happy to help. Well, we hope you've enjoyed this video, and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye!